Truth Be Told Project.
You know what's wild? When we picture somebody blowing up their marriage or wrecking a relationship, our minds usually skip straight to the big scene. The affair, the exposed messages, the hotel room, the shame. But in real life, it almost never starts there. Most of the time it starts with a sigh. You're sitting at the kitchen table after a long day, the kids are loud, the house is chaotic, your spouse is stressed, your phone keeps lighting up with emails and notifications. And there's this tiny moment where you look around and think, does anybody actually see me? Does anybody even know how tired I am right now? Or you're in the car after work. You're sitting in the parking lot, not ready to go inside yet. You scroll your phone for a few minutes, not even sure what you're looking for. You just don't want to feel like this. You don't want to walk into another evening where you feel invisible or misunderstood or low-key resented. And maybe in that moment, a notification pops up, a DM, a, "Hey stranger, how you been?" A laugh from someone who gets your dry, corny sense of humor. A conversation with somebody who really listens, and it feels so small, so harmless, so deserved. But there's this thing I want you to think about and I want you to wrestle with in this episode. Before there is a scandal, there is a sigh. Before there is an entanglement, there is an emptiness. Before the heart cheats, the heart starts to wonder. Today we're talking about that in-between space, because in episode 1 we talked about spiritual drift, and the sub episodes that go with episode 1. And then we are now in episode 2 when we're discussing emotional drift and intellectual drift, in episode 3, in which we are in now, while people start to drift emotionally by way of escape. And there's going to be a follow-up episode to this one. This one particularly has to do with escaping by finding a somewhat sense of relief in another relationship besides the one you have with your spouse. In the next episode, to follow this one, we're going to be discussing other forms of escape by way of addictions, because there are a lot of Christians who deal with addictions, whether it be to social media, alcohol, drugs, sex. There are many different addictions. We're going to talk about that. I don't want to ramble off the rails here. But today, we're talking about people finding a way of escape because there's something internal in them that is lacking, and they're looking for it in another person because they feel that their spouse doesn't hear them or isn't addressing the need of the hour. And in this episode, I'm explaining why hearts wander when longing looks for a way out. And I want you to know up front, this is not an episode to shame you or anybody else. It's an episode to name what's going on in your heart before it goes further than you ever meant it to go. Because here's what's in it for you. If you can understand why your heart is wandering, you can catch the drift before it becomes destruction. You'll walk away with language for what's been going on inside you, maybe for years. And you'll have some tools to protect your heart, your relationship with God, and your current or future marriage. So let's start where scripture starts, with the heart. What is a wandering heart? Let's be real. Follow your heart is one of the top slogans in our culture. but the Bible gives a different warning. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" That's not a Hallmark card. That's God saying, hey, don't assume your heart always tells you the truth. It can deceive you, especially when it's hurt. So what do we mean when we say a wandering heart? Here's how I'd put it. A wandering heart is a heart that stops being honest with God and starts secretly auditioning substitutes for him. It doesn't always look like outright rebellion at first. Sometimes it looks like survival mode. I'm just trying to cope. I'm just trying to feel okay. I'm just trying to not break down. And you can be in church every Sunday, serving, posting Bible verses on your social media accounts, while your heart is quietly interviewing idols behind the scenes. You can be married, in ministry, reading your Bible daily, saying grace at dinner, and still have a heart that's wandering. It's not always obvious from the outside because a lot of wandering starts in the places nobody can see. The late night scrolling, the replaying of certain conversations, the what if fantasies you entertain when you feel unseen or unappreciated. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Notice it doesn't say ignore your heart or shame your heart or pretend your heart doesn't feel what it feels. It says guard it because it's the source. So if your heart starts to wander, it's only a matter of time before your choices, words, and habits follow it. And that's why this matters so much. The real danger isn't just what we eventually do. The real danger is what we start to secretly desire and justify in silence. That's where drift becomes dangerous. I want to walk you through what I'll call the drift path because almost nobody wakes up and says, today is the day I sabotage my marriage, my calling, and my witness. It's not like that. It's a slow, subtle process. So let's break it down. One of the main things you have when you spiritually drift away from God, away from your relationship, away from yourself, is there is a spiritual disconnection. This is when your prayer becomes thin, or when your prayer life becomes thin. For a lot of us, the wandering of the heart starts with a quiet spiritual drought. You're still doing the Christian stuff. You go to church, maybe you still serve, you say the right phrases, you have the right theology, you know how to make all the apologetic talking points. But if you're honest, your prayer life is surface level. Lord, bless this food. Help me have a good day. The Bible has become content that you teach or share or post, but it's not bread that feeds your soul. You feel like God is distant and you're quietly frustrated about it. You might even say it out loud, but your soul is like, God, where are you? Because I'm tired. And here's the dangerous twist. When God feels far, substitutes start to feel close. Instead of bringing our ache to him, we start looking horizontally. And that sets up the next stage, which is emotional loneliness. Together, but not connected. You can be in the same house with someone every day and still feel like you're a million miles away. Conversations become rather transactional. Did you pay that bill? Can you pick up the kids? What time is your shift? What's for dinner? And somewhere in there, you realize we don't talk about my heart anymore. We talk about my schedule. You start to feel like roommates. You handle business, but not each other's burdens. You might still love each other. You might still pray before meals. You might still go to church together. But emotionally, you feel alone. And we don't like to sit with that feeling for long. So we start reaching for relief. Another thing is we have unmet needs plus unspoken resentment. This is where it gets real. You start noticing the pattern. They don't really listen to me. They shut down when I bring up how I feel. They never affirm me. They just assume I'll handle everything. And instead of addressing it and saying, hey, I feel unseen, I feel unheard, I feel taken for granted, you swallow it. Why? Sometimes you're afraid of conflict. Sometimes you feel like I've tried before and it didn't go well. Sometimes you don't even have language for what you're feeling. But all that swallowed hurt doesn't disappear. It turns into quiet resentment. If they really love me, they'd know. Why do I always have to bring it up? Fine, I'll just shut down. Now your heart is wounded and closed. Then you have the new listener who just miraculously appears out of nowhere to come and address the loneliness that you feel in your heart. It's right on cue. That person just shows up. It might be a coworker who laughs at your jokes. It could be a ministry teammate who checks on you. A person in your DMs who listens to your story. It could be an old friend you just reconnect with. They ask how you're doing, and they actually wait for the answer. They remember details you shared. They send an I'm praying for you text at that exact moment when you feel low. And at first you tell yourself, it's not that deep. We're just friends. I finally have somebody who listens. But your heart feels something, feels relief, feels lightness. It feels like it's being seen. And if you've been emotionally lonely at home, that relief is intoxicating. You start making internal justifications in your heart. This is when your heart starts doing negotiations behind the scenes. I'm not doing anything wrong. We're literally just talking. If my spouse really cared, I wouldn't need this. I deserve to have at least one person who actually listens. We're Christians. We talk about God. It's fine. And instead of confiding in God about the ache you feel between you and your spouse, instead of confiding in your spouse about the distance, you pour that emotional energy into this other person. You move from God as your refuge to a person as your refuge. And that's when the heart isn't just hurting, it's wandering. And then there's selective secrecy. Here's the final stage in the drift path before it becomes blatant. You don't necessarily lie. You just stop telling the whole truth. You delete a message. You keep certain conversations for you. You change the name in your contacts. You don't mention how often you talk to them. You tilt the screen away from your spouse when they walk by. Your heart is partially invested somewhere your covenant doesn't cover. And by the time it becomes obvious on the outside, by the time people can see something's off, the drift has been happening on the inside for a long, long time. Now I want to go under the hood, because if all we say is stop talking to people who tempt you without dealing with why your heart was open to that in the first place, you'll just find a new person, a new outlet, which we're going to talk about in the next episode, or a new fantasy. So let's talk about some deeper roots. The first is unprocessed pain and old wounds. Some of our wandering has nothing to do with the present moment and everything to do with what we never healed from in the past. Maybe you grew up being criticized more than you were encouraged, never feeling enough for your parents, Being overlooked, bullied, or rejected. Having a father or mother who was emotionally absent. So now, as an adult, every time someone really sees you or compliments you or leans in to listen, it hits deeper than the moment. You're not just enjoying the compliment now. You're trying to heal a wound from 15, 20, 25 years ago. And if you never process that pain in God's presence, if you never name that wound, your heart will quietly start wandering toward anybody who gives you even the slightest hint of validation that you never received. Unhealed wounds don't just hurt, they hunt for relief. They'll use whatever person, place, or thing, scroll, message, or moment they can to feel okay for a second. The next thing is we have this hunger for validation. This is huge for both men and women, but it often plays out differently. For a lot of men, the hunger sounds like, do I still have what it takes? Player. Players don't, players crush a lot. Is that what Big Pun used to say? I'm not a player, I just crush a lot. For a lot of men, the hunger sounds like, do I still have what it takes? Does anybody respect what I carry? Am I more than just a paycheck or a problem solver? For a lot of women, the hunger sounds like, am I still desirable? Does anyone cherish me? Do my emotions matter to anybody? We were created for connection, for being known, for being loved. That's not the problem. The problem is when we chase that validation horizontally as a replacement for the validation that was meant to first come from God. Now, I'm not talking theory here. There are moments I had to look in the mirror and admit I wasn't just wandering into sin. I was wandering from my sense of worth in God. When you don't feel loved, affirmed, or valued in your core identity, you go looking for proof. And wandering hearts love to chase proof. Another thing we have is boredom and numbness. Let's be honest, sometimes the wandering doesn't come out of deep trauma. It comes out of numbness. Life becomes a loop of work, home, screens, sleep, church, repeat. You love your spouse, you love your kids, you love God, but everything feels flat. In that numbness, novelty feels like oxygen. The new conversation, the new inside joke, the new person who laughs at everything you say. Suddenly, you feel alive in that space in a way you haven't felt in a long time. The danger is this: wandering can feel like coming alive again, but it's a counterfeit revival. It's emotional caffeine. You feel energized for a moment, then crash with more shame and confusion than before. Another thing is resentment and unforgiveness. Another driver of wandering hearts is quiet resentment. Those spoken, unresolved conflicts start piling up. I always have to be the responsible one. They never initiate affection. They don't listen unless I'm yelling. They don't see how much I've sacrificed. Instead of working through these things, we build a private case against our spouse in our mind. Now, when someone else is kind, patient, attentive, your heart compares. See, this is how it's supposed to feel. If my spouse wanted to, they could be like this too. So the wondering becomes in your mind your reward for putting up with pain. Resentment always looks for an outlet, and wandering hearts often feel like they're just balancing the scales. Another aspect we don't consider in all this, in our emotional spaces, in our relationship spaces, is spiritual warfare and whispered lies. We cannot leave this out. There is a real enemy who loves to take our pain, our loneliness, our frustration, and amplify it with lies. Whispers like, you've given so much. You deserve something for you. God understands your needs. He won't mind this. Nobody has to know. You're not hurting anybody. Your spouse will never change, so stop trying to change them or to make them change. Or the big one, this person understands you in a way your spouse never will. Now, hear me. People can understand us deeply. We're meant to bear one another's burdens, but when that sentiment becomes a justification for emotional energy that crosses boundaries, we move from comfort to compromise. Now we need to name something directly because wandering hearts often land here before anything physical happens. Emotional affairs. Let's define it clearly. An emotional affair is when you give the emotional intimacy, loyalty, and energy that belongs to your covenant to someone outside of it, even if you never touch them. A lot of Christian marriages are being silently hollowed out by emotional affairs that don't look affair-ish from the outside. This is what happens with a lot of ministry leaders. They counsel and try to help certain people of the opposite sex, and they develop these emotional connections. This is when nobody's caught in the hotel room. Nobody's caught sexting. Nobody's making obvious moves. But emotionally, lines have been crossed. Some of the common lies we tell ourselves, or some of the rationalizations that we tell ourselves, is we never did anything physical, so it can't be that serious. We're just really close friends. This is a part of ministry. I have to help them. They understand my spiritual struggles more than my spouse does. It's just a prayer partner thing. We talk about the Bible together. How can that be wrong? Listen, two people can pray together and still be slowly undermining a marriage. It's not about the topic of the conversation. It's about the attachment in the conversation. So here are some of the warning signs. Let's get real practical here. If any of these hit too close to home, don't shut down. Take them as an early alarm, not a final judgment. You're more excited to talk to them than to your spouse. Their name on your phone lights you up. You look forward to their messages more than messages from home. Another thing is you share deeper parts of your heart with them than with your spouse. They know your fears, your hopes, your frustrations, in a level of detail your spouse hasn't heard in months or years. Another thing that might take place, these are warning signs, remember. You vent to them about your spouse. Now they're not just a friend, they're a third party in your marriage dynamic. They get the behind the scenes of your spouse's flaws, and that creates a triangle. Fourth, you hide or downplay the relationship. You change how you describe them in conversation. You might say, oh, it's just somebody from work, while leaving out that you talk to this person every day. If your spouse picked up your phone and saw your messages, you feel a wave of panic. Another sign, warning sign for you, is you replay conversations and imagine what if scenarios. You find yourself daydreaming about, what if we were together? What if I had met them first? What if my life had gone a different direction? The relationship becomes not just a comfort, but a fantasy. And here's the thing, and you know this, for a lot of believers, emotional affairs feel like a safe sin. We think, I didn't commit adultery. We never did anything physical. We're not that kind of people. But Jesus raises the bar. In Matthew 5, he talks about lust, and he says, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Why? Because God isn't just after our behavior. He's after our hearts. An emotional affair may not involve a bed, but it absolutely involves a heart. And hearts are what God cares about most. Wandering hearts don't just break rules, they break design. God designed marriage for covenant level loyalty, emotionally and physically. And when our hearts wander, we're living outside the blueprint. I want to talk briefly about the costs, not to scare you into shame, but to snap us out of the lie that says it's not that big of a deal. It's just in my head. There's a cost to your soul. First, the cost to you when your heart is wandering, you start to live with a low-grade anxiety. You're always half worried somebody will notice the shift. You feel guilty in worship. You feel less sensitive to God's conviction. You start avoiding certain scriptures, certain sermons, or conversations. You become afraid to talk to God in prayer because you recognize that what you're doing is wrong, even though you don't want to admit to it, and you know that God will deal with you on a conscious level and deal with you by way of conviction, so you avoid God by not praying. You can't fully enter God's presence because you're holding a secret behind your back. And over time, you get used to living at half volume spirituality. You're there, but you're not really there. Second, there's a cost to your marriage, cost to your relationship. Even if your spouse doesn't know why, they can often feel that something is off. You're more distracted. You're less emotionally invested, quicker to be annoyed, slower to pursue intimacy. Why? Because your emotional energy is being siphoned off somewhere else. The attention that should be going into repair, connection, and growth at home is going into maintaining this other emotional world you're living in. And over time, that weakens the foundation of your covenant, even if there's never a big blow up. For those who aren't married yet, this still matters. If you train your heart now to wander anytime it feels uncomfortable, lonely, bored, or unseen, you're building a pattern that will follow right into your marriage. You're teaching your heart, when I don't like how I feel, I'll just escape into something or someone else. Another cost will be to your witness and your purpose. Third, the cost to what God called you to do. The enemy loves wandering hearts because they're distracted hearts. You can't fully run in your calling when your emotional life is tangled up in secrecy. You can't give all your focus to kingdom work when half your mental energy is managing a double life. And some of us have delayed or derailed years of purpose, chasing emotional crumbs that never satisfied us anyway. Okay, let's take a breath, because if we stop the episode right there, this would just be one long, you messed up type of message. But that's not the gospel, and that's not the Truth Be Told project. We tell the truth about the struggle so we can tell the truth about God's grace. A wandering heart is not a hopeless heart. It can become a returning heart. So let's talk about the road back. First, it starts in the most important place, in God's presence. Some of you, maybe for the first time, need to stop performing in prayer and actually confess, God, my heart has been wandering. I've been giving my emotional energy, my thoughts, maybe even my fantasies to someone or something else. I feel ashamed. I feel confused, but I don't want to keep living like this. Name it. Name the person. Name the pattern. Name the fantasy. Name the need. Not because God doesn't already know, but because confession is agreeing with God about what's real. The enemy loves secrecy. The Spirit works in the light. Second, you need to ask, what was I really looking for? Was it validation, comfort, escape, adventure, to feel desired, to feel respected, to feel in control? Because here's the thing, A lot of our sin is actually a distorted search for a legitimate need. It's okay to want to be seen. It's okay to want to be heard. It's okay to want intimacy, adventure, connection. The problem isn't the need, it's the strategy. So instead of just praying, God, I'm so horrible, I messed up again, also pray, God, this is what my heart was trying to get. Can you meet me there the right way? That opens the door for transformation, not just behavior management. Third, bring it into community. This is the hard part. Swallowing pride and admit when we've messed up is hard. Now, when I talk about bringing it into community, you want to make sure it's the right people, because there will be nothing worse than bringing intimate details about your life and about your experiences and about temptations to a person that is unsafe. Now, the community that I'm talking about might look like a trusted pastor, a Christian counselor, a wise mentor of the same sex, a close friend who's not afraid to tell the truth. Now, sometimes pastors have great intentions. A lot of pastors have wisdom, but a lot of them are not professionally trained in helping us to find and discover what's really going on internally in our hearts, in our minds. And Christian counselors, if you have the ability and the resources available to get the assistance of a professional Christian counselor, I would recommend you go with that, because they have a way of doing, I guess I would call it like archaeological. That metaphorically, it's like digging up stuff that we've buried or disregarded for a long time. They have a way of probing the mind and asking certain questions to give you the direction you need. But I would say some pastors may have that capability too. It depends largely on the pastor, but you just want to be very careful with it. Another part of your community could be a wise mentor of the same sex. That's another thing that I want to put out there. You want to make sure that your mentors and mentees are the same sex, or they could be like extremely older than you, kind of like a motherly or a fatherly figure. But it's you stepping into dangerous territory of developing an emotional connection with a person is of the opposite sex, especially if you find that person attractive. Another part of your community to consider it bringing your struggles out to is a close friend who's not afraid to tell you the truth in a loving fashion. You don't want to share, like I said, you don't want to share intimate details about your struggles with somebody who's going to beat you with the truth. You could use truth maliciously and really hurt people. So make sure that the person that you have confession with is gentle with the truth. Remember, it's not beating people with the truth that brings people to repentance. But there's a scripture that says, the grace of God, the mercy of God is what brings people to repentance. Okay? So make sure that person will not endeavor to beat you with the truth. You don't have to tell everyone. I don't recommend telling everyone, but you need to tell someone. You might say something like, my heart has been wandering. I've been building an emotional attachment that doesn't honor my covenant with God or my spouse. I don't want to keep doing this. I need help setting boundaries and healing whatever is underneath. The conversation is scary, but it's also a doorway to freedom. And depending on the situation, there might also need to be a conversation with your spouse that's delicate. It might need wise counsel and support We'll talk more about that approach in another episode. If there's a specific person your heart is attached to, you'll almost certainly need to set new boundaries. For some, that might mean stopping all private conversations, delete the number out of your phone. It means limiting interaction to necessary and professional only. If it's somebody at work, only discuss things about work very quickly, very publicly in front of people. Also, remove access on social media. In some cases, creating physical distance. You may want to change your role, change your position, change teams, or change rhythms. I know I can hear some of you asking, isn't that extreme? It depends on how honest you want to be about the danger. Jesus said some strong stuff about this in Matthew chapter 5. And he said, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. He's not saying literally harm yourself. He's saying take sin seriously enough to make drastic changes. If this relationship is the doorway your wandering heart keeps walking through, loving God and loving your spouse might mean closing that door completely without leaving a crack. Not to punish you, to protect you. This whole series is about living by design, not by default. God has a design for your heart, your relationships, your sexuality, your emotional world. Default says, I just go where my feelings take me. If I'm lonely, I wander. If I'm bored, I wander. If I'm hurt, I wander. Design says, I bring my loneliness, boredom, and hurt to God first. I build patterns of honesty, confession, and boundaries that protect what matters most. So your prayer might sound like, Lord, reteach me and reteach my heart how to come to you first. Re-anchor me in who you say I am. Heal the places in me that keep searching for validation in the wrong place. Help me rebuild trust, not just with people, but with you. All right, let's get super practical. This is your Live by Design spotlight for this episode. A simple practice you can actually do this week. I call it the 7-day heart inventory. For the next 7 days at the end of your day, doesn't have to be long. I want you to grab your journal or your notes app. Apple has, for iPhone users, Apple has that journaling app. I absolutely love it. And write down one question. Where did my heart drift today? Toward God or toward a substitute? Then underneath that question, jot down moments where you felt a strong emotion, anger, loneliness, sadness, shame, excitement, what you instinctively wanted to run to in that moment. Was it a person, a fantasy, your phone, food, porn, scrolling, or did you actually turn to God? Was it a chemical substance? Don't edit, don't judge yourself, just notice. And at the end of the 7 days, look back and ask, are there patterns in who or what I run to? Are there certain times of day I'm more vulnerable? Are there specific triggers that send my heart wandering? Here's the what's in it for you on this. This isn't about shaming yourself. It's about finally seeing the patterns that have been steering your heart without your permission. When you can see the pattern, you can change the pattern. That's living by design. Now, I want to slow down and give you some design check-in questions you can sit with in prayer, in journaling, or in conversation. You don't have to answer these all right now. You might pause this episode, screenshot this part, or come back later, but let them sink in. Is there someone I'm emotionally more honest with than I am with God? or with my spouse? Question 2. Who am I secretly most excited to hear from during the day? What do I feel when their names pops up? Is there any conversation? This is question 3. Is there any conversation, thread, or message that I will feel uneasy showing my spouse or a trusted friend? 4th question. What need in me feels most unmet right now? And where am I trying to get that need met? 5. If I keep walking emotionally the way I'm walking right now, where is that road likely to lead in 6 to 12 months? What would it look like practically to bring these longings before God instead of just letting them drift? You don't have to have the perfect answers. Just start with honesty. God can work with honesty. He will not work with pretending. For our words to live by, in this episode, I want to take us back to a verse we touched earlier, but let it land a little deeper. And that's Proverbs 4:23. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I want you to hear that as an invitation, not just a warning. Guarding your heart doesn't mean building walls so high that nobody can reach you, including God. It doesn't mean pretending you don't have needs or desires. Guarding your heart means being honest about what's happening inside of you, being intentional about what you allow to shape your emotions. It means being willing to put boundaries in place to protect your covenant and your calling. Guarding your heart isn't about locking it away. It's about guiding it back again and again to the only one who can truly handle its weight. Your heart will wander sometimes. Mine will too. But by grace, our hearts can also return. And as we land this episode, I want to say this. If you're listening right now and you realize your heart is wandering, this is not the episode where God writes you off. This is the episode where God calls you back. You are not your drift. You are not your wandering. You are not your worst DM, your darkest thought, or your most shameful attachment. You are deeply loved by God, who tells the truth about sin and also goes to the cross to deal with it. This episode was about the seeds, those tiny movements of the heart we often ignore. But in the next episode, we're going to talk more about a different form of seed. So if this episode resonated with you, don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who's on the edge of this, or maybe already in it, share this with them, not as an accusation, but as an invitation. Thank you for hanging out with me in this conversation. Thank you for being courageous enough to look at the places your heart might be drifting. If this helped you, take a moment, journal your biggest takeaway, talk to God about the part that hit most, and consider sharing this episode with someone you trust. If you want to reach out to me, you can catch me at Jay Wilson, that's JAYWILSON, at truthbetoldproject.com. Once again, that's JAYWILSON at truthbetoldproject.com. All one word. We don't heal in hiding. We heal in the light together. Until next time, remember, don't just live by default. Live by design. God's design. Peace.